going on, everyone? About to get this show started. Today we're going to be talking about clutches on semi-trucks, automated systems, in particular automated systems, but this will also apply with manual systems as well, pretty much the same. Also going to be talking about injector cups, what to look out for, when to replace them. So tune in if you're suspecting any injector cups. I'm gonna wait till more people jump on. Appreciate everyone that's joining us. Let me know where you're watching from. Hope everyone's staying warm. If you're looking for service, we're running TAT. Good evening, everyone. We're about to get started here shortly. Hope everyone's doing well. Today I'm going to be covering a few items. A couple in particular. We're going to be talking about clutches and injector cups. In particular for automated systems, semi-automated systems. A lot of these clutches are similar to manual setups, but I want to discuss what to look out for, and I'm also going to be discussing injector cups. Hope everyone's doing well. Let me know where you're watching from. If you're looking for service, we have a shop in Dallas, Texas, 4140 Langdon Road. Give us a call, 972-225-3017. We're currently running a promotion, TAT Express 20 for a 10% discount on deployment from New York. Love the channel, love the music, appreciate it. Chills, thanks for joining us. Let me know if you guys got any questions or concerns about your truck. As I mentioned, I'm going to be discussing automated systems, clutches, what to look out for. A lot of these trucks are coming out off the assembly line automated, and it's really just a semi-automated setup. It's not really a fully automated system. Houston's in the house. What's up, Michael? Chavez, thank you for joining us. So these transmissions, they're not really fully automatic where they have a torque converter. They still run a manual style clutch system. And what they'll do is use air to disengage and engage the clutches. So today I'm going to be talking about different problems you can have, what to look out for. And if you guys got any questions about your trucks, make sure to hit that chat. Chat's going to be live throughout the whole broadcast. And I'm also going to be talking about injector cups. Injector cups on some engines are going to be serviceable. On some trucks, they're not going to be serviceable, which means if you do have a bad injector cups on some engines, you will have to replace the entire head. But I'm going to talk about what to look for, and I'm also going to be talking about preventive maintenance. So all in all, we're going to be covering clutch issues on semi-automated transmissions. We're going to be covering injector cups, when injector cups should be replaced. So if you got any questions, Houston sounds like they're in the house. Appreciate you for joining us. Code Red. If you guys got any questions, make sure to hit us up in the chat. I'll be more than happy to help you guys out. So let's get this show started. We got a late broadcast today instead of an early broadcast. Trying to see how see if more people is going to join us in the evening. I know it's Friday. Everyone just got paid, probably on their way home. Hope you guys have a good, safe weekend. Make sure to stay warm. Don't drink too much. Let's get this show started. Turn this down a little bit. Get this camera started. What's up, everyone? Hope everyone's doing well this evening. We got an evening broadcast today, and we're going to get this show started. So clutches on these particular transmissions are pretty much the same. An automated system, a lot of these semi trucks are coming out with automated systems just so that they can kind of cut down the operator in the truck. But you know, these trucks do last a long time. The clutches do last a long time. A lot of these drivers are familiar with automated systems. Some prefer automated systems. Let me know what you prefer if you're watching, if you have an automated or manual. I know a lot of the truck drivers that have been out there for a really long time prefer manual systems, but a lot of these fleets are going with automated systems so that it's easier to find drivers, and supposedly it's going to make the transmission last longer and cut down on clutch replacements, stuff like that. Just kind of cut down on maintenance. Now, what is different about these styles is nowadays every model, every manufacturer is coming out with their own transmission. You have the DT12, which is made by Detroit. You have a PACC-R. I have an image of a PACC-R as well. Now, some of them are going to be very similar, but most of the time, this clutch here came off of this PACC-R here. So this is a PACC-R setup. Let me see if we got enough images here. So this is a PACC-R setup. As you can see, the PACC-R name is in the back. You can see this large air line here. This is another reason why it's important to change out your air dryers, because on these automated systems, you can see a lot of air is just directly into this module. So this is a large air supply going into the module. Now, this is going to be the controller. If you're familiar with the older style automated systems, they run an XY shifter is what they used to call it. When Eaton first originally came out with the automated system, it was an XY shifter, which were they were battery operated or electrically controlled. They're electrical actuators or electrical motors that would sit on top, and that's what it would basically just shift the gears for the operator. Now, those particular ones didn't run too much on air, but there was a lot of problems with the electrical side of those motors. Over time, they would get weak, and they were real susceptible to failure. Those were the first styles that came out. It would still have, some of them even had a clutch pedal. Those were super semi automatic, but nowadays they don't come with a clutch pedal at all. They come with these style clutches, which are very similar. They run on a throwout bearing. Let me see if I can get an image of the front end. So these particular clutches are not very light. They are heavier. For some reason, they pretty much look similar, but this outside clutch housing is a lot heavier than the standard manual ones. And they come with different styles, different designs. This particular clutch, it's got a different designs where it's got another ring of here with smaller springs. I have really not seen this before from PACC-R. This is the one thing that's kind of annoying. That is annoying as a technician or a shop, is when you're dealing with these types of clutches, not all of them are going to be the same. As I just mentioned, manufacturers are coming out with their own transmissions, and some of them are even coming out with their own style clutches. So with this particular job, we had to order the clutch, and it's kind of a little bit of a delay. We are using part houses, so sometimes these clutches are not going to be in stock. But all in all, a lot of these different transmissions clutches will be in stock. And as I mentioned, it's a blend of manual and automatic. This style clutch is really for a manual system. It's not for a fully automated system. So what a clutch does is disengage the transmission. So you can see the front end, the front spline of the transmission here. That's what stabs into the clutch here. And this clutch bolts onto the back of the engine or the flywheel. And I have one mount. This is the picture of the flywheel or the clutch mounted. This is the back side. This is with the transmission removed. The transmission stabs right here in the center. So whenever this pressure plates here are pushed down, it disengages this friction plate. This friction plate here gets disengaged from the flywheel because the engine is constantly spinning. So once this area pressure plate gets pushed, as I mentioned, it pulls this pressure plate off from the flywheel as it's rotating. And since that clutch is geared inside this on this transmission, this is how the transmission actually disengages from the actual engine, so that the shaft can slow down and get into gear. The transmission always has to disengage from the engine to shift gears. Now, some of these transmissions were made to shift gears and float gears, so it's really interesting that on these particular transmissions, I don't believe that they're pushing the clutch in at every gear whenever they're already going. They're actually floating gears. So they're not using the clutch very often, only when you stop and go. But I want to give you a breakdown on how these are actually, why they're a blend of a manual and an automatic. A lot of these common manufacturers, this here is a PACC-R transmission, and it uses the same style of automated system. It uses controllers up top. I want to give you a view of what it looks like from the front. I don't know. I don't think I have one of this one, but I do have one of the Eaton. Now, what's interesting about these transmissions, even though they have different model or different names on them, they're pretty much manufactured by the same Eaton. Eaton is the one that's manufacturing all these clutches and transmissions. So they're just getting their transmissions designed and then slapping their name on it. They may change a little bit here and there, but a lot of them are just coming from Eaton. And I'm looking for the Eaton Endurance, and this will give us a good breakdown on what this one what the semi-automated transmissions look like. So let me pull this document up real quick. I might need to search it. It's been a while since I pulled it up, so let me pull this document up real quick. Appreciate everyone that's joined us. Oh, we got a few comments in the chat. I'll get to those here shortly. If you got more comments or concerns about your truck, hit me up in the chat. I'm about to answer some questions here shortly. I just wanted to look up this document so that I can get some more information on this, give you a more breakdown on what these transmissions, how these transmissions are set up. Might have to download that document. All right, so it looks like I don't have this document readily available. So give me a second. Let me pull it up differently here. Let me see here. So what I want to pull up is pretty much a breakdown of what these transmissions look like through the manual, with the manual. And these manuals is kind of what helps us troubleshoot these particular. For now, I'll give you an idea. This is a DT12, and it's different from most of them. This one uses an electric actuator. So it's still a semi-manual transmission. If we look at the clutch, and I'll give you on this particular job here, what happened with this one is, and I'll cover the PACCAR as well. And I shared a short on this one, but that particular actuator, which is it's the clutch position sensor, and what it does is just detects the position of that actuator. So, but if you look at the clutch, it's very similar. You see how the style of the clutch is similar. This one's all scuffed up because this cable wasn't secured properly. That cable goes onto this actuator. As I mentioned, you can see the cable here. This is where it was rubbing up against the transmission. It came in with fault codes, and it caused this error to pop up. But the main item that I wanted to bring up is how these setups are very similar. I'm going to get to your questions here shortly. Let me pull up this document real quick about Eaton's Endurance, so that I can give you a breakdown on what it looks like and how these work. What I do like about Eaton is they have a lot of information available online. So we're going to talk about the breakdown on how these are set up. What we see here, let's go to the transmission here. Okay, so as you can see, this is an Eaton. This is right off of Eaton. Now look at the similarities to Eaton. Pretty much makes all these transmissions. They just slap different names on them. Some you got them all. The Ultra Shift was the first one that came out. Volvo iShift is pretty similar as well. But all these semi-automated systems are the same. This one here is using instead of they're all using air. You can see the air hookup on this side as well. And let's actually look at the breakdown. So they're pulling off the solenoid. That's an actuator, clutch actuator. So this here, instead of you pushing the clutch down, it's using this actuator here to engage and disengage the clutch. So at the end of this actuator, oh, I'm sorry guys, I thought y'all can see that here. But you can see that here. So if you look at this here, there we go. We look at the front of this transmission here. You can see that it has this. This is a it's pretty much just a lever. So it's got the release. This is, they call it the release bearing and clutch. So this area here is going to be rotted on the clutch. On the back side is where this actuator is, where you can see how it just pushes forward and down. So instead of you pushing the clutch, it's pushing the clutch for you. And on this side of the transmission, you see this other airline that feeds to this side. They have some discs there where, you know, where the stop brake used to be. This is where the stop brake is made now. They put a stop brake on the counter shaft, on one of the counter shafts. And what that stop brake does is slow the internal gear down. This is the correct level. What that internal brake does, this is the stop brake here. It uses air to apply pressure to this solenoid, and it applies pressure to the counter shaft to slow the counter shaft down so that you can get it in gear. So if you're familiar with manuals, a manual would just still have your foot lever here, the throw out bearing here, and it would have a stop brake to slow down the shaft when you push the clutch down. All these transmissions are going to have different setups. Even though Eaton makes all of them, I believe that they change just a few things so they can avoid any kind of copyrights. You know, if someone comes out with if a manufacturer comes out with an idea, they patent it so that another manufacturer can't copy it, but they do still copy it. But they'll just change some small items, whether it's how the clutch is being deactivated or engaged or disengaged, how the controller works or how it's called. But they're all similar. They're very similar. There's not too much difference. Besides the DT12, that one is a little bit different. But most of these automated systems, you're going to see the same. So let's look more into the clutch here. So this is your clutch. It bolts up to the flywheel. This is a diagram of the flywheel. And as I mentioned, whenever these pressure plates are pushed, it disengages the clutch. So that's the role of the clutch. These are very commonly built. As I mentioned, Eaton is a big supplier for all these clutches. When you are doing these jobs, it's very important that you have the right tools. This is not like a manual transmission clutch. Even though I said it's similar, this one's a lot heavier. So you want to make sure you have the right tools. If you've ever tried to put a clutch on without a transmission jack, it's very difficult. I'm not saying it's not doable. It is doable. I used to do clutches before we got all the equipment that we have now. At the beginning, I was doing clutches, just manhandling them and putting them up there. And I actually remember I made a clutch jack like this. I used an old spline. I used an old input shaft, and I welded a plate to a small car jack, and that's what I would use to center my clutches up. So these pieces, getting the right pieces is very important. You won't be able to do that with these particulars. You won't be able to make your own tools with these particular clutches, and you don't want to even try, because not getting everything taken down and trying to put everything back up, and then your clutch doesn't line up. So these are just all specs. Anytime you put a new clutch on any truck, you want to turn the flywheels. The flywheels get worn out over time since those friction plates are driving on that flywheel. I'll give you a picture of the flywheel here. You can see how the flywheel, this one here is burnt. This is signs of burnt. And what happens here is more than likely this transmission wasn't disengaging or slipping. You can see the burn marks, and in the middle as well, this is called a pilot bearing. These pilot bearings is what this shaft actually goes into, and it keeps that shaft centered and rotating correctly. So anytime you get this type of service, anytime you do have a clutch replaced, you will have to replace a flywheel. I'm sorry, you do have to turn it. You want to service this. This one looks like it has been a little bit, but you can tell that this clutch just kind of tore it up a little bit. So it's still reusable. It's still reusable. You want to make sure that the flywheels are within specs, because putting all this back together and having an issue with not wanting to engage or disengage is very tough. Been there before. Save you some time. Let's get to some of the comments, guys. If you guys got any more questions or concerns, let me see if I can answer them before we move on to the next section of clutches. So Nick says, got a 2021 T680 PACCAR engine. 2 fault codes come up. 3 SP6550 transmissions clutch. 1 F14 diagnostic code indicates a problem with the transmission's first clutch. Specifically, an inappropriate clutch engagement command. Second fault code is SP5 or 5 SP512. Driver's demand engine percent torque indicates fault code related to the engine's torque. Demand exceeding its capability, specifically meaning the driver is requesting more torque than the engine can currently produce. Truck has 396,000 miles. What can it be? Would the dealer warranty it? Look into your warranty if there is a warranty on it. Some warranties will specify if driveline parts are in warranty. If they are in warranty, then I would definitely go that route. It sounds like to me at 396,000 miles, that's pretty low miles. We've seen some failures. We've seen some failures before. So this particular code, let me see what I can find for you. But some of these codes, if they're talking about disengaging, when you talk about the first code will domino the other codes as well. So if you have a code has an issue already and you're continuing to push it, it's possible that those other codes are going to be related to the first code that's coming up. So SP6150 refers to the transmission clutch 1 in the system. FM14 indicates a special instruction fault, often associated with calibration, configuration errors, or clutch performance outside expected parameters. Possible cause could be software calibration, incorrect or outdated software, and transmission and TCMs. Now, I want to stop right there because not all the time it's going to be. It is always good to check if the software needs to be updated, but you're lucky if it's just a software. I'm hoping it is. That would be an easy fix, but most of the time, if it's a software issue, we don't really see those correcting the problem most of the time. But it's still always good to get it checked and make sure your software is up to date. Software calibration issues, clutch performance issues, wear or damage to the clutch plate or actuators. I wanted to mention the actuator because these actuators, just like this one here. Now, since you have a PACCAR, this PACCAR transmission, let me go to that PACCAR transmission. You can see that it has a solid air line going to it. Now, if you have issues with air supply, for example, contaminated air from a lot of condensation in your tanks, not draining the air tanks often, not replacing your air dryer, this is going to cause contaminants to go into the transmission and cause errors. So this is another problem that could occur. So that's when it says actuator or faulty clutch plate. Now, if we have an issue with the clutch, that means the clutch is not disengaging and you're not able to get. Are you having any shifting issues, or what type of problems, what type of driving response do you have there, Nick? What is it doing? Is it still driving properly? Is it not going into the upper gears, or are you staying at low speeds? Let me know. So could be a sensor malfunction as well, or faulty clutch position sensor. Now, when we had this issue pop up over here, where's that at? I had an issue with that sensor that I showed you earlier. Now, that sensor there would cause problems as well. This particular job was done. Let me go here. Let me pull this back up. Let me pull that transmission image back up. DT12. So here it's describing, this is a different style, but here it's describing that you can have a possible sensor failure, faulty clutch position or pressure sensor. So it could be a bad sensor. In this particular case, we had a sensor cable right here. You can see the sensor cable there. It rubbed up against the transmission or the clutch, caused it to wear. You can see it here, and this caused the fault. So it's very good that you're bringing up your fault codes. Don't ignore them. Definitely get it checked out. Now, when I talked about hydraulic problem, I'm bringing up the hydraulic problems, but it's really considered air, and it would be linked to air. So air in the hydraulic system or low transmission fluid is another fault code that could possibly be associated with you have. Loose or corroded connection in the wiring harness to the TCM. So if it's an electrical problem, be sure to check your batteries. I'm always preaching about batteries, battery connections. The video that I just released, I released a short clip about how important batteries are. And when you have loose battery connections or faulty batteries, this type of problems can pop up as well. Nick says the driver has hauling empty trailer, drive for about 20 minutes and the clutch was overheating. After 1 week of sitting at the shop for a different repair module for the trailer lights replaced. Okay, so if it was sitting and you have low mileage and you're saying the clutch is overheating, definitely get this checked out. It could be quite a bit of things that what's interesting is with the troubleshooting with PACCAR using diagnostic software, which is PACCAR ESA or Eaton Service Ranger. So PACCAR has their own software, but you can use Service Ranger as well. Service Ranger is another OEM software that is offered by Eaton, and it will be another license. So this is kind of why it's important to use shops that have experience and maybe already have this software available, because it really helps the technician troubleshoot without tearing up everything. So using this diagnostic software, whether it's PACCAR ESA or Eaton Service Ranger, to check for any updates, that's very important. The updates is something I mentioned earlier, but what I do like about this software is you can run tests. You can run to see exactly what's going on with the truck. Since we have a problem with shifting, and you said the clutch is overheating, it's possible it could be a hardware issue. So the next thing would be inspecting for wear and tear, verifying proper adjustment if it hasn't been worked on. At 300,000 miles, I'm sure it hasn't been worked on. And if it was sitting in the shop for an electrical problem that you had, make sure your batteries are good. If it's sat in the shop for, you said how long did it sit for? After 1 week of sitting in the shop, if it was cold, hasn't been running, and it barely started running on the first pickup, route didn't make it because it started giving problems. It was cold up in Ohio, cold air from Canada. So it can be the code. It possibly can be the code. Definitely look into that. If you didn't service your air system with a proper dryer, or replacing a dryer and making sure you don't have too much condensation, yes, cold air can cause some problems. So make sure to get it checked out, because if you're saying that the clutch is already smells like it's burning, definitely got to get that checked out. So with the softwares, we're able to check the position sensor, check clutch sensors. Definitely you can check the electrical connections. That's something that you can do. Ensure you don't have too much condensation in your air system. If you are up there and you're in Ohio and it's really cold, I would consider some kind of additives that you can put to cut down on so much condensation in your air system, because yes, this will cause some problems. The clutch calibration, that's a test that we can run with the software as well. I do recommend you doing that as well. The tools that you're going to need to troubleshoot such codes, of course, is either going to be the PACCAR ESA or the Service Ranger, Eaton Service Ranger. If it's an electrical problem and there's issues with sensors, you're definitely going to have to test circuits. So using multimeters is very very useful. Basic hand tools, service manuals is what we use as well. This service manuals will also guide you into the right direction, let you know where the sensor positions are. As I mentioned, since these manufacturers are slapping their name on it, but Eaton is making it, and they need to change it a little bit so they don't do any kind of patent infringement. Some of these sensors are in different areas. If we look at this particular failure here, when we had this PACCAR that we had fail in the shop when the transmission was coming, let me see here. This clutch, the clutch failure that we had that I showed you earlier, that actually caused additional damage here. So I'll cover that here shortly, but this is the flywheel housing, and you can see that there's oil in the flywheel housing. You want to replace these real main seals. Make sure you use the right tools. Don't try to hammer those in. Not using the right tools definitely delays a lot of work. So this truck was having issues going into neutral. The pieces here that were breaking off on the clutch on this particular job, the pieces here that were breaking off on the clutch, this piece here that broke off ended up damaging the speed sensor or flywheel. This is a sensor on the flywheel, so it would be the RPM sensor. So that particular sensor will need to be replaced. So appreciate that question, Nick. Definitely get that checked out. It's unfortunate that it happened right after leaving a shop. I know that shops pretty much are going to get blamed for that, but just understand if the truck was sitting and it wasn't giving you that problem before, cold air does definitely cause some problems, but definitely get it checked out. Don't burn it up. Don't burn the clutch up. If it's a sensor or something like that, it's going to be a lot less headache for you. So I would suggest your next step would just to be, check it out. Check the battery connections. That's pretty much all that you can do yourself. Drain the air tanks. If it's still having issues, definitely take it into a shop that will have these tools, which is the software and the experience to troubleshoot it properly, because what you don't want to do is have a bad diagnostic and have them replace the transmission or replace the clutch or just replace something that doesn't need to be replaced. And as you mentioned, at 300 and some thousand miles, you said it may still be under warranty. So hopefully that's under warranty for you. Good question. Appreciate you sharing that. If there's more addition that you'd like to add onto that particular this fault here, let me know. Okay, Code Red says, have you ever encountered the bolts loosen on the two motors for the Eaton XY shifter? I have seen a lot of failures with that particular style. Those are the first. That's the ultra shift. That's the ultra shift that came out. That was kind of like the first ones. And the ultra shift used XY shifters, which were, they go through a lot of stress. So I have seen them come loose before. Whenever we were running, what's good about these maintenance manuals is they'll help you kind of like, hey, the most common parts that usually go bad on these particular trucks are these particular setups, and a lot of them were the XY shifters. So when you had the XY shifter out, when you had the ultra shift out, you had to stock the wiring harness, you had to stock the XY shifter. These were all components that were susceptible to failure right away. So yeah, I have seen issues with those two motors coming loose like that. They go through a lot of strain and they get neglected. Most of the times when they're coming apart like that, you really have them at high mileage. When Eaton, actually, when I recall, and they still have it out, that on the ultra shifts you will have to replace those XY shifters. And it's the same with some of these controllers that are on top of these transmissions, which they are massive. They've adopted from the XY shifter. Let me show you what they've evolved to. Let me show you that real quick. This one's called the this is what replaced the XY shifter. The mechatronic transmission. So this is the MTM. This is a bigger one, and as I mentioned, PACCAR has the same one too, but it's probably called something different, and they slap their name on it. But they pretty much do the same thing. They may be ran a little bit different, but they're doing the same thing. This is massive. This one's huge. It replaces the whole part of the top part of the transmission. But if you look at a manual transmission and you take the top off, it's going to look the same. And a lot of the components are similar. So this is what, let me see what they're running here. Release bearing, yoke release. So here we go. We got the breakdown of how these transmissions are put in place. This is the Enduro transmission. So they're taking out the throwout bearing there. They take off the fork here. You see they pop that off that pivot. You see how that's just a pivot? And they pull it off the actuator. So one side is just a ball pivot. You see that? And then the other side is hooked up to your actuator. And that's your actuator here. Well, I left that section on the actuator here. The linear clutch actuator. So that's that piece there that's connected to that pushes that clutch lever. So that's kind of why I mentioned these are not really fully automated systems. They are semi-automated systems. Here's a image of them pulling the top of the computer off of the controller.
ECM from the.
And as I mentioned, these are all the same. Look at here. You see it? It's right up top. But look what they did. They slapped PACCAR on it. And I guess they're just trying to keep everything on their own. To me, it makes it more difficult because now we got to get the parts from different areas. PACCAR puts their name on it, so it's got to be manufactured by Eaton, and then PACCAR puts their name on it. And I don't know why they do it, but yeah, I've seen those XY shifters, and this is what they've evolved to. That I mentioned, they've evolved to these larger. This is where they pull it off here. So he's going to pull it off here. Be careful if you are pulling these off. Look at this. This is how huge the top part of these transmissions are. You can see that. Very heavy. Very heavy. But this is what replaces the XY shifter. So they evolved from on the Ultra Shift transmissions to the Endurance transmissions. And this is what they use now. And these things are massive. They're very heavy. But they do last. They do last. They're really strong. They're really well built. Steven's got a question. Have a question about my truck. Is using 2 gallons of antifreeze per week. What could be the problem? That's a lot of antifreeze. What I would do first is pressure test it to see hopefully it is an external leak, because if it's an external leak, you can just repair it. If it's a radiator or a hose or a water pump, anything, any kind of hoses, heater cord, that's a lot better than that coolant going internally. Now if you run a compression test or a antifreeze test, a coolant test, you're just basically putting pressure in there, not more than 12-15 psi, and you want to use a tool to do this and watch to see if the coolant is external. If the leaks are external, then of course get them fixed. If you can't see it, then that means it's either going into the engine or it's being burnt. Keep an eye on the oil. If it is going into the engine, you want to make sure to not run that for too much longer, because mixing coolant with oil is not a good thing. So, Steven, I appreciate your comment. What I would suggest you do is get it checked out. Don't put it off. Do a pressure test on the cooling system to see if it's an external leak, as I mentioned. If it is an external leak, fix it. Get it done. That's a very heavy leak. 2 gallons a week is very heavy. I'm hoping it's external. So no leaks. Okay. If you don't have no leaks, then it's possible that it could be an internal leak. Check your oil levels. Are your oil levels rising? If your oil levels are rising, definitely stop running that truck, because if you do have contamination going into your oil, which you should notice that. If 2 gallons are missing, you should notice that if it is going into your oil. If it's not going into your oil, it's possibly that it's getting burnt. So there's components that are going to need to be removed to inspect that. Now, if you're sure that there's no leaks, you just don't see that on the ground. You don't see any signs of leaks on the ground. You don't see any sign of leaks on the exhaust, whether it's all the way down at the end, on anything like that. You don't see any leaks. If not, and if it's internal, check that oil. Steam coming from under the engine definitely might be mixing into the oil, man. I'm sorry to say, if you got steam coming out of there, how does your oil look? Check your dipstick. Steam coming from under the engine is not a good sign, especially if it's heavy steam. If you've never noticed this type of before and it's starting to happen as you lost the coolant, it's possible that it could be mixing into the engine. You could have a liner that have went bad, something in the head gasket. More than likely, it could be liners. But definitely get it looked at. These liners are sealed These liners are sealed with O-rings. If the oil looks good, your oil looks good, but you're burning 2 gallons of oil, you're definitely is burning it. I mean, if you're burning it, it's not going into the oil. Let me see. What engine is it? Let me know what engine. How many miles are in it? 2 gallons a week is a lot. And your oil levels are good. Oil levels are good, and there's no external leaks. It's got to be burning it. What engine is it again? DD15? Man, you sure that's not going into the oil? Because that seems like a lot of coolant. It's not noticeable. I would check the EGR cooler as another suspected failure. What you can do is take off the hot pipe, which is on the back side. Let me see if I got an image of that engine here. No, I don't have an image. Let me see if I got an image of this engine. Let me pull it up for you. So inspecting the hot pipe is going to ensure your EGR cooler is not leaking. Usually if an EGR cooler is going to be leaking like that, you're going to see some type of coolant leaks. Especially at 2 gallons. 2 gallons a week, that's very extreme. That's excessive, super excessive. So I'm surprised that you're not seeing it. But if it is the EGR cooler, I'm going to show you some images here on what you need to remove to check that out. Let me see if this is it. That is an image of the engine, but I want to get a better image here. Let me see if I got a better one. Let me see here. Let me see here. I'll get to your question here shortly. Check that daily. 1,000,000 miles. Okay, that's a lot of miles. If you check the oil daily, then let's check this EGR cooler. I'm hoping it's the EGR cooler because, as I mentioned, that's a lot of coolant to lose. So I got a DD15 image here that I want to show you that I can kind of point you out where you can pull that hot pipe off and check it out. Because what you're going to do when you pull the hot pipe off, we'll do it here with this image here. So this is the hot pipe here going up to the EGR. I definitely thought I had a better image of this engine. Let me double check real quick, guys. Be patient with me. So that particular engine, and this is going to be they're all going to the EGR cooler on top. The EGR cooler on top. Okay, I see what image that is. Let me get that image real quick, guys. Let me see here. Boom. So removing the hot pipe is going to help you check that EGR cooler. Sorry guys, I'm trying to find this image. This might be it. So, well, I don't think I can find this image. Well, the image that I used the other day, let me change it up here. I can do it right here. Wow. Give me a second, guys. Boom, 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 boom. Boom. All right. So we'll talk about the EGR cooler here. Let me move these images out the way. All right. Okay, so here you go. Here's the hot pipe here. Here's your hot pipe going to your EGR cooler. This image here, is of the EGR cooler. So pull that hot pipe off. See if you got any coolant. Okay, you already checked that out. I should have checked that while I was looking for that image. What'd you say? Million miles. I checked that day. Check out the hot pipe. No antifreeze. Check out the EGR cooler. Nothing. We checked this today. EGR cooler today. What would you do? Pressure test the cooling system. Remove the oil pan and check cylinders to see if the coolant is coming out of. And that is your next step. If Trug in Life, appreciate you sharing that. The only reason why I didn't jump to that right away is because I was trying to troubleshoot. Anytime you're troubleshooting something like this, you want to make sure dropping an oil pan is definitely the next step to see where this coolant is going. Pressurizing the system to verify and make sure that it's not external, because sometimes you may not see it. So pressurizing the system and seeing if it holds pressure. If it's not holding pressure, then and you don't see it externally, and it's not going into the EGR cooler, then yes, that would be the next step, is pulling the oil pan, dropping the oil pan, pressurizing the system with the coolant still full, and see if you can see the coolant going into the engine. Now Steven stated that he checks his oil daily, so 2 gallons of coolant should be noticeable in your oil. So that's why I said that at the beginning, checking your oil level. So I mean, it's possible that it's still not going into your engine. It's possible you could have a cracked head and it's burning the coolant at 1,000,000 miles. That is a lot of miles. It's possible that you could have a cracked head. Now, if you open up the oil pan, that's a good idea. But just from what you're telling me, if the coolant was going into the oil, you would notice it on the dipstick. Double checking it is going to be fine. You can do that. Now, if you still don't see anything going through the oil or going through the oil pan after you drop it, pull the exhaust manifold. Now, if you pull the hot pipe and you don't see any kind of coolant, not even on the hot side of the pipe, you may have to pull the exhaust manifold to actually visually look at the exhaust ports. If you look at the exhaust ports and there's issues, APU, Gary Bates says APU, good. This is why I said pressurize the system before tearing it up. You want to make sure that that you don't have an external leak. Now, if you pressurize the system and it's holding, then I mean it could be a little tricky, because sometimes those heads will hold, or if it's a head gasket or a head, could hold pressure until it actually gets hot, and when that metal expands, that's when that pressure can actually starts being released. So Steven, it sounds like you may have an engine going bad on you. Could be internal. So just be prepared to either replace the head. Truggin is asking if your truck's overheating. I'm sure it may have got hot if you're losing that much coolant a week. I'm pretty sure it's gotten hot. So you may be looking at an overhaul. At 1,000,000 miles, that's a lot of stress to put on the engine. So let me know what you end up finding out. But be prepared to overhaul that engine, what it sounds like. I mean, we did have somebody in the chat. Gary Bates says check out your APU. That's another thing that ends up coming up. Trugger says check the EGR cooler. He says he checked that already. Steven's already checked that. He did say check the. Let me see. What would do pressure the cooling system? He already said replace. Yeah, that's something that. If coolant is going into the oil, it definitely should be showing up in the oil, man. That's kind of where I don't really see. It's possible it could be going into the oil, or you could be burning it. If you're checking it daily on 2 gallons and it's not going up, then that's pretty tricky there. At 1,000,000 miles, it does sound like could be an internal problem. Be prepared to overhaul that truck. Hi, what's your opinion on the transmission model FA? Oh, let me check it. Let me see that for you. E10. It's going to be an E10. I mean, all these are pretty much the same. So before I move over, let's finish up. We talked about the EGR cooler with your possible coolant failure there, Steven. It could be a head gasket, compromised head gasket. Cylinder liners, as I mentioned before, the cylinder liners have O-rings, and these liners are surrounded by coolant. So these O-rings start rotting over time, and when they rot at the bottom, they'll drop coolant into your oil. But you should see it in your oil. You should see it rising, because oil, when coolant makes it to the oil, it doesn't burn it off. It's just gonna rise and it's gonna turn milky, especially with 2 gallons. Yeah, that's Trugger Life says he hates milkshakes. So what he says by that is, if you're gonna get oil, if you're gonna get coolant in your oil, if you're gonna have that contamination, it's gonna look like milkshake. We checked the oil stick. We couldn't see any freeze on the stick. Just see steam at nighttime on the right side of the engine. So the right side of the engine is your hot side. That's your exhaust side. So it's possible that your head might be cracked and it's burning it, and you're not seeing it because it's burning it. So either one of those is not good. Whether it's going into your oil, which it doesn't seem like it's going into the oil to me, because you said you check your oil, your dipstick daily. And with you losing 2 gallons a week, it definitely would rise. It's possible you could have some cross contamination, but you can't see it. You can't really see it visually. If it is a cracked head, it's possible that contamination can still happen, but it's not that noticeable. To me, it sounds like a failed head. And if you're gonna open up, and if it's a failed head, replacing the head, checking the main bearings, especially if you've been running the truck, if it is, some of the coolant is making it to the oil, and if you do run it that way, oil does not mix with coolant, and it ends up overheating the bearings over time. Yeah, underneath the truck is, you said, just coming off from the crankcase filter here. This crankcase filter here is where it comes off of, right here. This crankcase filter. So it's possible that it is going into the engine. Definitely drop the oil pan, pressurize the system. Before dropping the oil pan, pressurize the system. Make sure that you don't have external leaks. Double check it, triple check it before you start tearing stuff off and checking it internally. Take your time when troubleshooting. Take your time and inspect everything around that truck when you're running that coolant pressure test, because you don't want to overlook anything. Also, check the air compressor. Air compressor has coolant going to it as well. Check your dryer. Check your air tanks to see if you have any signs of coolant. These compressors have coolant going through the head just as the engine does. So if the head fails on the compressor, it can definitely, that would be a better scenario than a head on the actual engine. Cold Red says, I don't know if a DD15 has a coolant crossover line that goes to the fuel heater, but I have had a problem before on the Series 60. Now, the coolant crossover line that goes to the fuel heater. Now, no, I don't. It does have a fuel heater, but it just uses the oil. No, actually, the only coolant that goes through it doesn't heat the fuel. It doesn't heat the fuel. The coolant module, I'll have to look at the fuel filter module, but there may be a cooler there, but no, it doesn't have that one in particular. Evaporation through the exhaust. Coolant may be leaking into the exhaust due to EGR cooler or gasket failure, causing the evaporation to leave no visible trace. Leaks less obvious. Heater core. Check your heater core. Small pinhole leaks. I don't think a pinhole leak would be the cause, since you're losing so much. Overflow pressure relief valve. If you have a faulty coolant cap, the pressure relief valve may allow the coolant to escape as vapor under normal operating. So that may be the case as well, but since you're saying you're seeing excessive steam coming out of here, that may be a sign that it's burning that coolant, because of course when you heat up coolant or any kind of fluid like that, it's going to cause steam. Definitely do the external leak test first. Pressure test the cooling system, as I mentioned, using a cooling system pressure tester to pressurize the system and inspect for leaks while the engine is cold and not running. Check the coolant for stains. Look for any dried coolant residue. Inspect heater cores. I don't think it's going to be heater cores. Honestly, I have a feeling it may be something going on internally with the engine, especially everything that you've been. If you say, okay, here it says inspect exhaust or white smoke. White smoke, especially on startup, may indicate coolant is entering the combustion. There's also dye tests that you can use with UV lights, but I mean, you should be able to find 2 gallons going somewhere, man. Oil analysis are very useful as well. It will detect what your eyes cannot see in the oil. Running oil analysis is what I recommend doing regularly if you own a semi truck. During your PMs, doing oil analysis, you want to catch any kind of contaminants going into your fuel or to your oil, like fuel or coolant or excessive metal wears, will definitely wear your engine out very fast. You can do a compression test as well. You with the Triple D software. With the Triple D software, what is it that you replaced already? What did you already replace, Steven? So, Minor, I know that you said you checked the EGR cooler, but was that while coolant system was under pressure? If not, check it with the pressure. Yeah. And 2 gallons a week, you should definitely have some kind of signs of residue. Especially when coolant burns up, it leaves a white residue. It's not just, you'll notice it. Check the air compressor. Definitely check all that out. So, back to the question that we had just earlier. You're more than welcome to share more details there, Steven. Keep me posted. We're gonna go. I'll go live again. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification button so that you can join us next time we go live, and give me an update. Let me know what you found out on that. It's very interesting. I mean, to me, it sounds like a internal failure, but definitely need to do a little bit more troubleshooting. We had a comment earlier about what my opinion on this transmission was. Lubrication interval 500,000 miles. Does have PTO capability. Now, it's just another model. This is the Advantage. This was before the Endurance. So I mean, these automated systems, they're all different. When you ask me what do I think about it, I need to kind of, I mean, they all have pretty similar problems. And this one's Advantage. This one's called the Advantage. Let me pull the information up on this one. So this is another example of an automated system and how familiar they are, or how similar they are. We'll look at the transmission overview. Okay, this is the one that we just had the comment earlier. This is one with still using XY shifter. We had a comment earlier about XY shifters on this one. He said, oh, how did I miss that one? Sorry. Who was that? Art Lopez? Sorry I missed that comment. Sorry I missed your comment, Art. Checking in from a fleet service in Phoenix, Arizona. How you guys doing out there in Phoenix, Arizona? Appreciate you checking in on us. Shout out to Arizona. What is your opinion on the X15 Cummins injector retainer rings? We just did our first one at the shop. Any comebacks on your end? Are you talking about the repair for the injector cups? Now, yeah, if that's what you're talking about, yeah, I mean, that's their only option. If it does come back, you have to replace the head, but that's their only fix. And I was supposed to talk more about injector cups, but we've already gone on here for a little bit on this transmission. But we had a comment earlier about this XYs, and this is what the XYs are. This is what XY shifter are. So the controller that I mentioned earlier, the larger ones, this is what replaces. So this is an XY shifter. This is what they're just, instead of using air, they use these electrical motors, and under this motor, just like a regular this is normal transmission. This is more of a simpler way to convert the manual style to a automated system, because a manual transmission, this is where the shifter tower would bolt onto. So a manual transmission is the same. You see how it has this here? That's the same that's on a manual transmission. This is the same setup. But what they did to make these automated systems quicker is they just added an XY shifter. So My opinion on the XY shifter, the evolution was still new, so you're not getting the type of shifting, the same type of shifter that you have with the same type of shifting that you would have with a newer transmission. So this is an older style. They don't use this style anymore. If you do have it, it's not bad, but you will have to replace the XY shifter. Make sure you have good batteries, because these are very sensitive to electrical faults. As I mentioned earlier, be ready to change out these XY shifters. Be ready to change out the harnesses as well. Electrical problems is what I see the most is with this one, and sensors. But just maintaining the system, keeping maintenance, keeping up with your batteries, changing out your air dryer, making sure you're changing out the oil every 500,000 miles. You still should have a solid transmission. But if you have high mileage, you're definitely going to have to replace these components. They're not going to be million-mile components. But Junior, that's what I think about that transmission. I just bought a 2020 T100 and it has that transmission. So it's not too old. It looks like 2020 model. So it's only 3 or 4 years old. So I didn't mean to call it old. It's just they're not using this style no more on a lot of models. I guess this is a more stout model compared to the first one. It's from the Ultra Shift. If we look at the Ultra Shift, let me pull up the Ultra Shift. Are you having any problems with it? I mean, I'm not saying that it's bad. It's not bad. So this is the first model. The one that you have is this one here. So Eaton just kind of updates their generation over and over. It looks like, let me see. It looks like it's the same XY shifter. Let's look at that XY shifter. It looks the same. Looks the same. Yeah. So they're going to go out. The XY shifter is going to go out. You can see how this older model, it looks more and more similar to just a standard transmission. You see that? So this is the evolution of the automated system. They're really manual transmissions, and they're just slowly evolving into just a transmission like this. You can see how this particular setup, as I mentioned, the shifter tower is very small. This is where the shifter tower would bolt down to, well, for you to shift it. Not used to an automatic transmission. Yeah, they are a little bit different to get used to. Just make sure you're not driver input is very important. If you're driving these trucks too harshly, don't push them too hard, and you definitely can cause some problems. So some of the clutch problems that you'll feel if you are having problems will be slipping, harsh engagement, unusual noises. Definitely will have some warning lights if it's automated system. Common problems are worn clutch components, as I mentioned earlier, pressure plates, friction plates, faulty clutch actuators or sensors, incorrect calibrations. Driver habits impact clutch longevity. Okay, so Junior, if you're new to this industry, or you're new, you probably, if you are, you're not, okay, whatever. But if you're new to that automated system, you're not used to it, definitely drive it very, just have good habits with driving. I released a short earlier about, being gentle on the throttle, and I was using another analogy, but basically just be gentle when you accelerate and be gentle when you decelerate. That's all. Just be very gentle with these trucks. You're dealing with very heavy components. It's not a car. I went earlier today to get some. I went earlier, and I was on the highway earlier, and I saw this guy. He was hauling a flatbed with some lumber, and it wasn't a full load, but man, this guy was swerving very violent. I mean, just like a car. He exited, and there's a 2 lanes, and the car was gonna go turn to a street, and he was right behind the car, so he just swerves into the vacant lane, and then swerves back in the lane he was. And you can see the wood. You can see the stack of wood just shifting like this while he's swerving. So, I mean, driver habits impact a lot. I mean, if you drive your truck properly, it's going to last you longer than you think. If you drive it very strong, you're pushing it very hard, you're racing, you're thinking you're, in a hot rod, you definitely can wear that truck out faster. Not only clutches, that'd be everything. Regular inspection and calibration is what I would recommend, especially since you're new to an automated system. Do regular inspections, calibrations when replacing the clutch components, proper operation techniques for drivers. If you guys got any questions on how you should drive it. If I didn't explain that well, let me know how you guys drive your truck. Now, I wanted to talk about injector cups, but unfortunately, I might have to change the title because I was only able to cover clutches today. Fortunately, I do want to keep the stream going, but we've already went on for an hour, and so that I can try to bring you some good quality content, I want to be more than likely I'm gonna discuss this on another broadcast. I'll change the title up, but we'll definitely cover injector cups tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow. We'll definitely talk about injector cups. I know that I put that in the title, but the broadcast went on for longer than expected. But I did want to talk about injector cups. We'll talk about that next time, okay? Make sure to keep up with these transmissions. If you notice any kind of irregulars, make sure to get it checked out. The Steven, who was the guy earlier with the problem with his truck after he picked it up? Nick, get that checked out, man. Don't keep running and burning up that clutch, because what you're gonna end up doing is you're gonna just exacerbate the problems. Right now you've already have warnings, okay? So ignoring these warnings are just gonna cause major problems. You're gonna exacerbate the problems. You're gonna extend the problems. It's gonna burn up more items, and you're gonna make a cheap repair. And we see it all the time. I always try to preach this. Now, as drivers have the final word. They're just like pilots in their plane. If they feel like something's not right, if you feel low power, if you have something that's irregular and you know that something's not right, you have to take action. If you don't take action, you're not taking the chances of mitigating the problem. You're being neglectful, and what's going to end up happening, instead of mitigating the problem, where it could be a sensor, it could be air pressure not correct, something small, could end up replacing the clutch or replacing components that didn't need to be replaced. So definitely get that checked out, and do not ignore those signs, guys. Your truck is talking to you, and maintenance is not an expense. Maintenance is an investment so that your truck can continue to run longer. A lot of times, if we do have trucks that come in that have all this backed up maintenance, it's very tough to get those trucks up to par, because you have all this backed up maintenance, and now everything is like a domino effect and cascading the problems. And instead of mitigating it and being proactive with maintenance, preventive maintenance, you can definitely cut down on these repairs. But what we do see often is all these maintenance will get neglected, and then we have an actual breakdown or an issue where we have low power, and we have to bring that truck back up to maintenance to be able to get that truck running like it was. So guys, listen to your truck. Make sure you got all the information you need. Hit us up in the comment section. If you see one of my videos and you got some questions, hit me up in the comment section. We'll do our best to reply back to you and get you some accurate information out there. So Junior says also the truck has a X15 efficiency series. It has a little blow by, but should I worry about it? Now, those X15s do have a crankcase pressure sensor, so if it is excessive, then it will give you a check engine light. Appreciate that comment. Art, that's a 100 on your side too. Art Lopez, thank you for joining us. Guys, if you got any additional questions, if you're watching this later on, you weren't able to catch today's live, make sure to share your information in the comments. If you want to share your experience, if you have an automated system, or if you had some clutch issues and you'd like to share with the audience, make sure to hit that comment section. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't hit that yet. Make sure to share the video so we can spread the knowledge. Also, be sure to hit us up if you're in the DFW area and you have a clutch problem. If you're looking for a shop to lean on and you can't get your work out fast enough, if the dealer's not working for you, they're keeping your truck too long, give us a shout, 972-225-3017. We're running a promotion to the end of this month, TAT 20. If you say it at the shop, you get 10% off your service. That's good to the end of the month. Only one-time use, so take advantage of it just to the end of the month. Guys, thanks for everyone that's joined us this evening. I appreciate everyone's support. Appreciate everyone's comments. If I didn't get to your comments or I looked over them, I'll make sure to try to reply to them next time. As I said, make sure to turn on the notifications so you're notified when I go live, and then you can all join us. Let me know what you think about this evening broadcast compared to the mornings or the afternoons. Which one works for you best? Guys, thanks again for everyone that's joined us. We'll see you next time. And be safe out there, guys. Be safe out there. Take your time. We'll see you next time.